Recording has started.
Welcome to the MWPA Finance Committee. This is Tuesday, November 17th at 2 p.m. Would someone please call the roll?
Novato Fire District,
Here.
Salinas Fire District,
Present.
Southern Marin Fire District,
Here?
Sleepy Hollow Fire District,
Here.
City of San Rafael, County of Marin,
That'd be you, Jason.
I was gonna say, I didn't know if Dennis was on here also. Present and
Thank
now
you.
accounted for.
City of Larkspur. Okay, and we have a quorum with 5 members present.
Thank you. Okay. Moving to item 3, agenda adjustments. Are there any agenda adjustments? Hearing none, we'll move on to item 4, open time for public expression. This is the time that we welcome any member of the public to address the committee on any item that's not on the agenda, because there will be time during the items that are presented for public expression. If you do so, please silence your cell phones during the meeting. Wait, I'm reading this off. Sorry. Just please let yourself be known so that we can welcome you to the meeting, and please try to keep your remarks to 3 minutes or less. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak?
I'm looking for any raised hands from our public audience. And at this time, there is no public comment.
Okay, seeing and hearing none, we'll move on to item 5, review of mid-year budget status.
Good afternoon, board members, committee members. I'm going to kind of tee it up for Elisa to follow up, and she can go through the attached mid-year budget report. And she's also going to make some recommendations for your consideration for adjustments to that budget report, or to our budget line items based on our actual and estimated expenditures. Elisa, it's all you.
Can you hear me okay? I think my heater is really loud.
Hear you.
Okay, great. So I made some changes to the budget to reflect more what we're used to at Southern Marin Fire. So if you look on the first page of the budget report at the top, you see that 38%. So that reflects where we are in the year just by days. And so then anything in red shows that we are over 38%, but for the authority, that's not necessarily a problem, because you'll see Fire Safe Marin, but we're expecting that. But those might just call out anything that you want to see. For example, the one that we would want to look at is the legal costs. But other than that, everything is on track. And I'm looking forward to December, when we can do our first disbursement to the member agencies and record our revenue. And we have the balance sheet now, which it now shows more detail. We are getting up and running with payroll. And so you'll see all that. That's what's new on the balance sheet. And then on the next page, the expense detail. What I'm still doing, because our expenses are so few, is I'm just including everything to date. That way it's available to anyone if they want to see exactly why any line is over or under. So you can see everything that we have paid out so far in that expense detail. And then the last page is just the County of Marin, because we still owe them money, and I'm working with Lauren Hood to make sure that we're on the same page before we pay them completely. Normally we won't have really any outstanding bills. And I'm actually hoping that we can make it to December without to draw more on the bridge loan from the, I don't have any bill from Fire Safe Marin, and even if I did, their net due is 30 days. So I would like to make it, there's 232,000 in the operating fund. But if we did need to draw on it, we just need about 5 days. We need to give the county 5 days to free up those funds. And then it would be available.
Great. I'd like to welcome Director Phillips and also open it up to questions.
Sorry for being tardy. I was in another meeting and didn't get here in time, so I apologize.
No, that's all right. Just for the record that we.
Yes, thank you.
So I have a question. First of all, starting with our, legal expenses, I think we expected that, but does this give us a big clue that our next round of budgeting, we have to make it a larger figure? Or do you think that this is just typical of a startup? I'm thinking, yeah, so what does anybody think about that? 328% over budget. I think we ought to think maybe we have to put some more in next year.
Well, what does the, if I could ask, what does the attorney say? I don't have a clue, but they must have some idea.
If I may, Director Hilliard, when we contracted with our legal counsel, both for the general counsel and for our environmental counsel, they had a very difficult time making an estimate what the cost would be based on us being a new agency and the unknowns, especially when it comes to establishing the process for our environmental compliance. To answer Director Hilliard's question, it is indicative of new agency, and I do think it's probably going to be another year of what we would figure as higher than normal legal fees until we get everything established, get our environmental consulting firm on board, which right now we're leaning on Remy Moose Manley quite heavily to help scope that RFP so we can get the best guidance possible and the best consulting firm on board. After that happens, I see our legal fees will start to moderate and we'll be able to adjust down. But I do feel that for the remainder of this budget year and the next fiscal that we will want a higher legal budget.
Sounds logical. Thanks. Anybody have comments about that? Okay, or any other, the balance sheet? Okay, it shows the short time.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, please.
I apologize, you interrupted you, but I've got a couple of questions if I could.
Good, please, Director Phillips.
As do I,
first-
Catherine, after Director Phillips.
Thank you. On the balance sheet, what is the accounts receivable for 24,000? Maybe you mentioned that, but
No, that's a great question, actually. We got a bill from Fire Safe Marin, and the radios that they were charging were double what we had budgeted. And so when I asked them what that was for, they said, oh, Novato wants you to pay for that and take it out of whatever you pay them. So basically Novato owes us for the radios that we purchased.
okay. The next question I would have, excuse me, relates to the local specific prevention. We budgeted 3.8 million, and my question would be, when do we intend to start making the distribution of those funds?
Want to get that one, Lisa? That's part of Director Phillips' great question. As part of the financial policy process that we're going through now, we had a subcommittee meeting yesterday with Directors Hilliard and Finn, and working on our disbursement policy, both for the local mitigation funds and the defensible space funds. We have a rough draft of that policy now. We are going to tune it up more and prepare it for a review of this committee, the Finance Committee, the week of December 7th, so that we can bring it to the Board of Directors for their approval at the December 17th meeting. And then that'll establish how we push out the local mitigation and the DSpace disbursements.
Okay, because I would imagine that some are anxious to receive those funds so they can get on with what they intend to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's just a small thing, and you don't have to make a change certainly on my part, but I might suggest, just for readability, that the heading in the budget report, which I'd probably call revenue and expense, but call it what you will. The heading is July 20th through in June 2021. And that should be more descriptive of the period that column represents, which in other words would be through November 16th in this case, or 3 months, or whatever the designation is. So you have some sense of what the time frame is, unless you and make it more obvious, perhaps.
Thank you.
Those are the only, pardon me, the only two questions that I have. Thanks for addressing.
Thank you so much, Director Kimball. Did you have something?
I do have a couple kind of general questions. One is I'm following on with Director Phillips. The defensible space, the 3.9 million, and then of course the local is the same 3.9 million. Is it likely that we will be dispersing all of that in this fiscal year by June 30, 2021? And I'm thinking, my question is partly in the context of maybe we've over budgeted in certain areas and under budgeted in others, and we may still come in on this budget by the end of the fiscal year, even with our higher than forecast legal costs. So I'm wondering if all of those 3.9 million in each of those two cases is really going to be dispersed.
Sorry about that. I did muted. My estimation is that the DSpace funds will be fully dispersed at the end of the fiscal year.
Okay.
However, it's going to be agency to agency specific if all of the local mitigation projects are dispersed.
Okay.
The good news is that we are going to very much underspend our 60% core monies, which is going to help us create a reserve as we move forward.
Thank you, Mark. That was my follow-on question then, is because that gives us a little wiggle room in terms of, at least from a public point of view, making the budget this year. I'm just wondering, another question, and it really doesn't have to be answered today, and it may be more of a lead-in for when we start our process for developing the 21-22 budget, fiscal years 21-22. And that is, are there anywhere general assumptions that were used to put these budget numbers together that we see in the budget column? And I don't think we need a great deal of detail, but it would be, and I've kind of assumed, and I didn't get too focused on this, and am still not getting too focused on it, because I assume that a lot of these numbers are more in the nature of a placeholder. So at least we could get a very rough order of magnitude budget out there. But I'm wondering if there are any assumptions behind any of these numbers that kind of lead to how you arrived at the, you know, for example, the 35,000 for the weather radios and the 3.8 for the defensible space and so forth. And in a way, it's leading into the next fiscal year when we do our budget preparation. How much, rigor will we apply in developing our forecast?
Many of the assumptions were driven by the first set of assumptions were the 60-20-20
Right.
funding structure. So that makes the DSpace and the
Right.
projects funds
Right.
a set
Yes.
number. And then for items like the chipper programs, NOAA radios, public education, red flag signage, those were core projects that were designed by the operations committee that for the most part, Fire Safe Marin has grabbed and run with them for us. And that's why they're invoicing us for those. The future budget assumptions for those items will be part of the operations committee as they develop the 21-22 work plan, which will drive the budget creation for the border, for the MWPA.
Okay, thank you. And in a way then, I guess as we go into the next fiscal year, when we look at the three, core, defensible space and local, I'm wondering how much do you think we'll be relying on the board or setting priorities, looking at core, setting priorities in terms of evacuation, notification, vegetation management, public education grants. How much direction will you need in order to start applying those funds and divvying them up I'm thinking specifically about core, and I'm most focused on evacuation and notification is where I'm most interested.
A good lead in for some of the things that we're going to discuss at the Board of Directors meeting, specific to establishing a board retreat to help us establish some of our strategic priorities during that board retreat in January, but also
Okay.
giving that type of direction to Jason and Dan as the chair and co-chair or vice chair of the operations committee as they scope and shape the 21-22 work plan.
Thank you.
Okay, good questions.
I just have one more if I could. Sorry.
Director Phillips, yes.
Just thinking, and thanks, David, for your comment. Oftentimes when individuals look at actual to budget, the budget is expectation. This is what we plan to do. And being considerably short of the budget means one of two things. Well, maybe you were more wise in your expenditure, and that's a good thing. The other possibility is, well, you only got half the job done because you only spent half the money. So particularly since we have so many in our communities looking at what we're doing, wouldn't want to send a message that, gee, we thought we were going to have this defensible space program at 3A. We thought we were going to get that done, and it comes in, let's say, at $1.5 million. Some might conclude you got about half the job done. So you want to be a little bit careful with the budget because it is a statement of expectation. And so my only word of caution would be, don't just be throwing numbers on there because we've got that amount of revenue and therefore we have that for allocation. If you don't intend to get that accomplished, then that's maybe not the right message either, because there's not a savings. There won't be a savings, I suspect, but rather something's not been fulfilled. So word of caution for what it's worth.
Point well taken.
Director Kimball.
Yeah, thank you, Director Phillips. That was a little bit of where I was going to is, how much rigor we apply in developing the budget numbers will really help us then defend what the outcomes are as we go through the fiscal year. Defend's maybe not the right word, but explain, convincingly explain where we are and why we are, or if we're not where we thought we would be, here's the reasons, here's the assumptions we missed. And I think we need at least enough of that so that we can look each other in the eyes and the public and say, here's what we thought, here's what didn't quite work out, or here's what we thought and we delivered. Nice. So thank you.
I agree. The optics are very important. I'm sorry, Chief Weber.
Yeah, thank you. So in regards to the 220% buckets, if you will, the direction that we originally provided was budget those as revenue in, expense out for municipalities. And then if if the project is in process, it can cross fiscal years and be held for that. But those funds would be, in trust, if you will, with the specific agencies, not necessarily the JPA, as those projects may extend from one fiscal year to the next. Originally, I think the JPA calls for an affidavit signed by the member agencies of the use of the funds. And then of course there'll be accomplishments that have to go along with the budget and the work plan that's been designated. But from a perspective of the JPA's budget, that's probably something that, we should make sure we solidify and provide clear direction to the member agencies as to exactly how that should look. So it's similar across the board, as similar as it can be, because I think that, Lisa hasn't released funds yet. For obvious reasons, everybody's kind of doing their thing and not having to put the JPA in further debt. But there probably should be some guidance provided based on the JPA language to the member agencies, how to handle that local funding piece and the DSpace funding piece. And just maybe we should add that to the tasks coming up here in the next few months.
Thank you. Director Kimball.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. That's really helpful. Just, it was pure coincidence. We met with our, we have a CPA come in quarterly, and we met with him, it was 2 weeks ago. And we mentioned that we want to be able to track our local monies from the MWPA, and also our transient occupancy tax, the incremental 4% that gets split in West Marin between housing and affordable housing and the first responders. And we use obviously something very simple, QuickBooks, but we can very definitely track, set up a class to track those. And I'm just going to throw this out, and if it's not a good idea, let me know. We had thought on our, as we're punching up our website, which needs a fair amount of work, we thought that what we might do is when we present our summary of our financials, we might actually show in general, not in detail, but in big buckets, where the local monies went that came from the MWPA, and also where the TOT monies went, so that our community and the community at large in Marin County can see that we're mindful about how those monies are to be spent, and that we're paying it, that we're adhering to that requirement. So if that's not a good idea, let me know. Sometimes be careful what you ask for, or how much you disclose. Thank you.
Executive Officer Brown.
Yeah, to piggyback on what Chief Weber and Director Kimball just said, the disbursement policy that we were drafting and working on yesterday with the subcommittee does touch on some guidance to the local agencies on how to track those funds and provide budget reports from, in the least painful way possible, provide budget reports from the member agencies to the MWPA for that type of tracking of disbursement. And so, Director Kimball, exactly what you're talking about was what we were drafting into those policies.
Are there any concerns about us disclosing that? I can't imagine there would be, but sometimes it's,
No, I think it's to our advantage to disclose it.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Good. Thank you.
Director Schwartz.
I was just going to point out, most agencies like MWPA that have a citizens advisory committee, they usually publish an annual report of where the money went. And I wouldn't be surprised if once that committee meets, that's a project that they'll want to take on.
Okay.
December 1st for their first meeting.
Good. Any other comments or questions? Okay. And Lisa, you got sort of what the gist of all of this is in terms of translating it on to the next round of forms. Okay, great. All right. If there are no, do we require any action, Executive Officer Brown?
Well, we'll require any public comment next, and then any deliberation amongst the Finance Committee members if we want to make any budget adjustments specifically to the legal fees to present to the Board of Directors at the December meeting.
Okay. Are there any members of the public who wish to address this item?
Looking for any raised hands from our audience members, and there is no public comment.
Okay, hearing none. I'm back to the directors. Are there any suggestions for alterations or changes to what's been presented for the upcoming? Okay, Chief Weber.
I would just add that as we're looking and building out the RFQ for the evacuation study, much of the data may be publicly sourced and available to us. The cost of that, which was budgeted at $1 million, may come down. So as we think about our mid-year projections, obviously we're over in the attorney fees, but we may be under in that selection. We'll probably know that after it goes out to bid in the first part of the year. But obviously we're going to have to make some adjustments to the attorney fees. I was rather conservative in that estimate originally. Optimistic, I would say. I don't know if Dan has something to add there, but I mean, it seems like it's obviously needs to be done, and there's an adjustment from baseline.
Well, we're here at the beginning, so this is our year of experiencing what's real. Okay. Any other comments or additions or suggestions? Director Phillips.
And just taking into account what Jason has said, So I have a great deal of respect for Jason, and that is if he's anticipating the legal fees, and sounded like Mark was as well, now would be the time to align that, it seems to me. As to the amount, the two of them would probably have to provide us some guidance. Again, I don't have a clue, but it seems to me if you're both saying that this is not adequate for an expectation for the attorney's fees, we should then recognize that before we take it on to the board and say, here's where we're at. And now's the time to do that. And that's what the finance committee is all about. So we ought to change it, it seems to me.
Director Goins.
Yeah, thank you.
President Goins, sorry.
I agree. I know that we're poised to, we received a 21-page memo from RMM, Remy Moose and Manley, which we've not yet been billed for. We've also, we're in the process of, in fact, we have a signed agreement, which I think has a maximum of, I think, was it $100,000, Mark?
Yes.
Executive officer. So, and I do know that we're coming into, at this next meeting, we will be, we're suggesting to the board that we form a subcommittee to identify subsequent information that we would like RMM to provide us to guide us in our path forward in regards to what we're going to do in regards to CEQA compliance. So, you know, we have some substantial legal costs ahead of us. And I think to the extent that we first of all, we know we've got this one bill incoming and we're going to have another substantial request of them. We should try to game this out. And I was actually surprised by the $100,000 figure. So we are talking about some substantial expenditures that are nowhere in the budget. So I think we should try to resolve that to the best of our ability. And the sooner the public knows that, we and the board discusses it, the better.
I think everyone's agreed.
I
Yes.
agree.
What's with Director Kimball?
Yes, no, I just wanted to say I agree with that and appreciate Director Phillips for surfacing that issue.
Okay, Executive Officer Brown. So can you tell us what the next steps are in order for this committee to make a recommendation to change the figures? Are you waiting for us to do something, or are you going to come up with something, a better estimate?
Well, we have two routes that we could take with this. Director Goins' point of the not to exceed 100,000 with Remy Moose Manley, I think is a good starting point. And then considering the additional use of our general counsel, I could make a recommendation now, or we do have a second mid-year meeting of this committee already on the schedule, and you can direct me to put in some more research, get some estimates based on our increased knowledge of what we're looking at in far as the legal support and of our environmental compliance, which is our number one cost right now when it comes to our legal costs.
Right.
And then I can bring that to our next finance committee mid-year meeting for a recommendation to be made then for that budget adjustment.
Director Kimball.
Yeah, and I support that, and it gives us time also to follow up on what Jason noted in terms of we'll have a better idea what the evacuation study costs are going to be, and then we can align those better without give us more time to be a little more thorough about it.
Good. Any other comments? So I think we're agreed that we will do this at the next mid-year review.
And I will provide a more accurate and detailed estimate for that budget change based on, like I said, our increased knowledge of what our likely fee or work that we will be asking of Remy Moose Manley and our general counsel.
Good. All right, so then I think then we're ready to move on to the next item, which is item 6, information items. Executive Officer Brown, do you have some information items for us?
The only information item I would mention is something that I've already discussed a little bit, and that was our meeting that we had of the subcommittee yesterday for the policy development. We will continue down that track. We've received direction. Elisa and I have received direction from the subcommittee board members, and I received some information from Director Finn today, and some from a resource that Director Hilliard provided last night, and we'll be folding those into the policies. Take some of the feedback that we got today as well into some of those policies. And like I said, I anticipate, and I hate to kill you guys with meetings, but and perhaps maybe we can combine the mid-year meeting with the finance policy meeting at the, and make them one meeting. And that way we can get those policies drafted out in a more final draft mode so that we can present them to the board.
Okay.
Mark, could you just, when you say mid-year meeting, which month are you, which meeting?
We have another one scheduled for December.
Right, and that's the one you're referring to.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other comments or suggestions?
This is David again. I do have one, and I don't know where it fits, but I'd like to get it out in the on the table before we end the meeting. And it may be that I'm the only representative on this committee that has this situation. That being that I'm representing West Marin, and so there are Mirror Beach, Stinson Beach, Inverness, Bolinas, all, and there I feel that it's my responsibility to coordinate with all of those boards, those representatives on our board. And I've resisted sending a note to Megan asking her advice about Brown Act kind of guidelines in that endeavor, because I don't want to run up a legal bill. But at some point, maybe we could be thinking about, we don't have to resolve it today, of course, what guidelines I have so that I can freely solicit input and give feedback to the West Marin agencies that are members of the, that are also on the board. Thank you.
David, that, if I may, I think that's a great question. And, as we stood this up, the same question I think applies to our Citizens Oversight Committee. We have 5 geographic areas, and these committees are designed to kind of facilitate groups the region to coalesce and communicate. And I know that there's, again, some questions regarding the nature of those communications. But I think it's a great question. And that same question is posed for the executive committee. So this is something I think that we should, I think perhaps it's a good retreat discussion to kick this around and deliberate on it as to, what is our vision and what are our respective roles and responsibilities. If we can do it beforehand, great, but that is talk we could take on at our retreat.
Yeah, and I don't think timing is critical on this, but at some point we should sort that out. And so I can obviously be patient and wait until we have that figured out.
And I'll do some research into that through the Brown Act documentation I have.
Thank you, Director Goins. Thank you, Director Kimball, and thank you, Executive Officer Brown. At this point, I would invite any member of the public who wishes to make a comment on this to make themselves known.
Looking for any raised hands among our audience, and there's no public comment.
Hearing no public comment, I'm moving to item 7, committee members' requests for future agenda items. Are any of the directors, would you like to make suggestions for future agenda items? President Goins.
These aren't big items, but I do know that we're headed towards a retreat, and I believe that the full board is going to deliberate. Mark Brown will present a suggested date and time for our retreat, which I think is going to be January 21st, all day. I understand there's also discussions about bringing in a facilitator, and it would be a cadre of facilitators, just given the number of folks and the number of rooms and some of the complexities depending upon. So this is for Executive Officer Brown. Mark, we've talked about it. We should probably start to pencil that out so that we can, for full discussion and presentation to the board. And then secondly, at the executive committee last month, we had a motion by Director McEntee that we move to action item notes as opposed to the current deliberative notes that we have from our board. And it was stated, and I understand that this would bring us some cost savings. So I've not heard what that means, how that transfers into our budget. So if we could also get that fleshed out at some point in time. We're just kind of, you know, we're talking about maybe $15,000 all in, but I just like to get that stood up.
Okay. Yes, Director Phillips.
Sorry about this, but I guess it's not clear in my mind, so I ask you to help me. To come back to the local specific pension or prevention funds, maybe it's already been communicated. I should have asked our city manager, which I didn't do, so it's my failing. But for the jurisdictions receiving these funds, do they have any idea what the schedule is and the amounts are? Because some pre-planning needs to take place here in San Rafael, for example. What are we going to do, and are we going to be able to afford it, et cetera, et cetera. So it doesn't turn on a dime either. So do we have such a thing, or do we plan to prepare such a thing? Communicate to our 17 different agencies.
Executive Officer Brown.
The amounts are a fairly well fixed amount, minus any changes due to like a low income senior tax exemption, but it's based on your population percentage of the 20%. So those amounts are fairly well known, and it was they're actually listed in our last budget that we adopted, the full budget. I can get you those more direct numbers soon, and then that's again part of the disbursement policy that we're working on, is that disbursement schedule.
Thank you.
Okay,
Chief
well,
Weber, did I
that
skip?
20% is net of our expenses. We're talking about $1 million expenditure plan. So I don't know how that works, quite frankly. But it would be of interest for future item. That's the agenda item. For future agenda, I think we need to make that pretty clear as to the timing and the amounts, so that jurisdictions can make their plans, have this as effective as possible. And so thanks for hearing me out on that.
Thank you. Did I skip over you, Chief Weber?
No, I was just in regards to President Goins' comment about the minutes. Tony DeFrancis does it. She's retired. I think it's like $200 a meeting for a long meeting, minutes wise. So it isn't a lot of money, but maybe some savings that are changing.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you, Chief Weber.
Thank you. Yes.
So as far as, I don't have an item for future agenda, but I do have a recommendation for a change of date. Right now, we're scheduled for December 15th with a board meeting of December 17th. So that would not give us time to be able to wrap up all of the recommendations for the December board meeting. So I recommend that we change that date to December 8th.
Good for me. This is David.
So, excuse me, Mark, there is a ESP Carbon Waterwise meeting from 1 to 3 on that date, and I participate in all those meetings. So if you can accommodate a different time, that date would work.
We can easily push it back to 3 or have it in the morning, whatever works the best for your.
I'm flexible with everyone else's schedule, what your preferences are, but 1 to 3 is not open.
I'm completely open.
Okay.
Well, speaking for me, we have a swearing in of the new mayor on December 7th, the day before. So I'm free as a bird. I don't know what her schedule is like.
You keep rubbing that in, you know that, right?
I know.
Got a heck of a smile on your face.
I know.
All right, I'll work with you guys offline to zero in on that date and time.
Okay, great. Well, since this item was specifically for members of the board, I don't know whether I have to ask for public comment, so I think I don't. So are there any other thoughts or questions that you would like to pose at this time? If not, we'll move to item 8, adjournment. So, okay. So do we need a motion to adjourn?
No, we don't.
No. All right. Thank you, everybody, for all of your input.
Thanks,
And-
everyone.
Thanks, everyone, for your time.
Thank you.
so much. Okay.
Take
Bye
care.
for now. Take care.